Welcome to today's webinar, and we would like to apologize for the brief delay. My name is Dan Johnson, and thank you for attending today's myHR Minute. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us and your continued interest in our weekly webinars. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. We will send out a follow-up email tomorrow with the slide deck, the webinar recording, as well as the HRCI credit and SHRM credit if you need recertification. Additionally, we will be sending out a survey. We strongly recommend that you complete this survey. We would love to know which topics you'd like to have us cover in upcoming webinars. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Britt Waterman, who is a senior attorney at myHRcounsel.
Thanks, Dan. Well, welcome everybody to our myHR Minute webinar. Today we will be talking about artificial intelligence in hiring. It is the new focus of the EEOC and something that legislators are starting to pick up on, and laws that may be spreading across the country and coming to your jurisdiction sooner or later, but it's a big focus right now. So artificial intelligence in an employment context. If you Google search AI in hiring, you will see a number of companies that sell software to help you sort through candidates and employees without having an actual member of HR sort through and analyze individual information. So it's not uncommon to use a program to narrow down a large number of applications or resumes or scan psychological testing after a conditional offer has been made or before a promotion is offered, for example. So how did the EEOC get involved? So now the EEOC has currently begun their AI and algorithmic fairness initiative. So they're taking initiative to see how AI may be causing a disparate impact. And a disparate impact is when a protected class is disproportionately negatively affected, regardless of what the intention is. Disparate treatment is when you intentionally discriminate against a protected class. Disparate impact is when a protected class is negatively affected regardless of the intention. And as you can see, Title I is what is the federal law that prohibits discrimination based on race, sex, religion, national origin, disability, age, sexual orientation, and gender identity. So the EEOC is taking a look into the types of software and other AI that is being used to scan candidates and employees. So you may be thinking, how can AI be racist or sexist or ageist or ableist? It's just a computer. How can it have some sort of intention to discriminate against a protected class? It's not always conscious or intentional, but if you have a group of straight, white, non-disabled software developers under age 40, they may design the software to look for code words that describe themselves or their peers. They may not consider cultural differences that would make women or people of color or people of disabilities how they might interpret a values question based on a personality test, or how their employment background or their educational background may look. So it is not, it's not always conscious or intentional, but we have to look at who is designing the software and who is using themselves as the example. It's not necessarily that we only have racist people designing the software, but people designing the software are designing the software for people who they perceive as being like themselves. So that leads to historical data. So if the input, you get input, what gets put into the AI or the decision-making tool, and that produces output. So if the input, people whose resumes or test scores said XYZ, produce good output, which would be no disciplinary issues or long tenure as an employee, they would program the software to select for candidates who provided XYZ input. But the input is not just the resume or the test responses, and the output is not just the tenure or the lack of disciplinary issues. So the input is the personal immutable characteristics, race, religion, ability, and the output is the personal immutable characteristics, again, race, religion, sex, age. So the input is not the input that is being put in that is producing good output. When we put in new input, the input that is new as opposed to the historical input that they were putting in, we're going to get new output. And the new output may not account for the changes in the workforce and the changes with the diversity that's happening in the workforce. So understanding how this might actually play out. So some examples of bias. So for an example, if the job requires standing and the AI asks, can you stand for 8 hours? Well, it's going to screen out everyone who says no. But if the job is something like a cashier and it can be done with a chair as a reasonable accommodation, someone can sit and still be a cashier, screening out everyone who says no to can you stand for 8 hours is going to eliminate employees with disabilities who could be accommodated with a reasonable accommodation and still perform all of the essential functions of the job. So that's an example of where the AI would be biased and give you poor output. Using screens or keyboards put visually impaired employees at a disadvantage. I think that would be a clear example. Giving a time test may filter out employees with ADHD who would be able to be accommodated or even come up with their own accommodations in the workplace. It's not necessarily reflective. 85% of women reported that the primary reason they quit a job was due to childcare, as opposed to 15% of men. One of the things that AI screens for a lot of times, a frequent red flag that AI catches is gaps in employment. Gaps in employment on the resume are something that gets screened out a lot. But when someone has to stay home with the baby, it is usually the woman, the mother, and that leads to absences from the workforce, something you're going to see on women's resumes far more often on men's resumes, leading to a disproportionate screening out of women. Now, code switching is the ways you may have or may not have heard of code switching. It's the ways in which an underrepresented group either consciously or unconsciously adjusts their language, their syntax, their grammatical structure, their behavior and appearance to fit in with the dominant culture. I'm going to give you an example. Have you ever heard someone call someone else something like ghetto or a thug based on their speech or appearance, when what they really meant was that person sounded or looked too black? Be honest with yourselves. People of an underrepresented group may speak or look differently with their family and friends than they do at work when they are trying to fit in with a predominantly white or straight or certain religion or certain age workforce, trying to fit in to get ahead, and this may end up backfiring on them when AI that measures emotion or personality traits flags their code switching as being untruthful or inauthentic. So this is something that that is very serious. And something that would signal the need for a bias audit which is what we're looking for with AI, and which is what the new laws are designed for. Amazon and Microsoft. So if the world's biggest software companies, the world's biggest tech companies have a problem with this, again, you may wonder how your AI software is doing. Amazon software, they had to shut this down in 2018 because they downgraded resumes that included the word women and attendees of all women's colleges, because historically they had not had many women engineers and computer scientists. Now, they did not deliberately program the AI to reject women. It was just that the experience and college choices of women indicated that they were non-male, and then that was dissimilar to previous employees. Again, input versus output. Microsoft AI uses facial recognition software to measure emotion, and they use this emotion to determine desirable employee traits. And the software consistently assigned negative emotions to the faces of Black men more often than those of their white counterparts. And this is actually not surprising, as there's a history of racial discrimination which attributes the characteristics of aggressive or threatening to Black employees when their white counterparts would be described as assertive or passionate in the same situation. So this really doesn't surprise me that this happened with this facial recognition software. But again, Microsoft AI had to shut this down, and it just makes you wonder, if the top tech companies can't do it right, what does that mean for the future of what we're using? So New York City's got the first and the most thorough law, so about automated employment decision tools. So the automated employment decision tool is any computational process derived from machine learning, statistical modeling, data analytics, or artificial intelligence that issues simplified output, including a score, classification, or recommendation that is used to substantially assist or replace discretionary decision-making for making employment decisions that impact natural persons. Break it down, like I said, any computer or artificial technology that makes the decision instead of someone, an actual person looking at the data and assessing it. So what a bias audit is an impartial evaluation by an independent auditor testing the tool to assess disparate impact on the persons of any category that's required to be reported on the EEO1. The bias audit and the publication on the website must occur before the employer ever uses the tool. The candidate must be notified at least 10 business days before using the tool. The law is silent on the employer's obligation to provide an alternative or an accommodation, but some of this is going to fall under the ADA and not under the New York City law. Could an employee with mental illness request that they be assessed based on their resume and an in-person interview rather than being screened by facial recognition software and a standardized personality test? I mean, that may be an ADA accommodation and not the New York City law at all. Again, we're going to have to look at disparate treatment as well. The law also requires that the employer post on their website or make available to a candidate upon request information about the type of data that is collected, the source of the collected data, and the employer's data retention policy. Now, this applies to candidates and employees residing in New York City. So it's a small segment of the population, but it is spreading quickly. The New Jersey state legislature has just introduced an extremely similar bill, and we know that legislation like this tends to start on the coasts and spread inward. Other state laws, similar laws in Illinois, employers who rely solely on AI to determine whether a person will qualify for an in-person interview. So if they use a video interview first to determine whether a person will qualify for an in-person interview, they have to gather and report the data to the Department of Commerce, and the department analyzes the data for racial bias. In Maryland, you cannot use a facial recognition service for the purpose of creating a facial template during the hiring process unless the applicant signs a waiver. Massachusetts and DC currently have proposed legislation in this area. Right now, that legislation is very broad. We will see how it gets narrowed down in the employment context in the upcoming months. But like I said, it starts on the coast and it starts to spread inwards. So this is moving very quickly. HR is in a really different or really difficult role when it comes to this. The company may have chosen to go in the direction of becoming a more diverse and inclusive workplace, and rightfully so. AR may get charged with organizing diversity training, training the hiring team, organizing mentorship programs within the company, any number of projects taken to fulfill that mission of diversity. But HR may not know that your hiring software is working actively to undermine all of your efforts to create a diverse and inclusive workplace by preventing diverse candidates' applications from even making it onto the hiring manager's desks. So HR is a really tough spot to be in because you've been tasked with all of this promoting diversity and inclusion and equity from the top down, and one complaint from the bottom up is going to leave upper management needing someone to blame. So you're kind of in the sandwich that HR so frequently is in, which makes an issue like this so difficult. So what can you do for your next steps? HR, I like to look at it as HR is the EMT and your legal department is like the surgeon. So you're going to have to work together, but HR is going to have to be the first responder to the problem, and legal and upper management are going to have to amputate if they find themselves with discriminatory technology and processes on their hands. So look at the employment decisions that are being made by your AI. Look at the candidates that are getting screened out and do your own informal bias audit to see how things are working. Kind of keep track. I know, again, like I said, it's a difficult role for HR because you've got a lot going on, and kind of analyzing this data on your own is very difficult. But you must treat all employees and applicants fairly, equally, and consistently. If a process is having a disparate impact, it's your job to go up the chain to eliminate this process for everybody. Don't try to push people through to try and overcompensate. You're going to have an equity issue on your hands if you're trying to pick and choose people to override the AI. And like I said, states are going to start catching up with this, and you're going to have to be ready. So really observe and be aware and communicate what's going on if you are using AI. So thank you for participating in the myHR Minute today. If you have questions and you are a client, you can always open a ticket in the Ask an Attorney portal for further questions. If you are not a client, you can go to myHRcounsel.com to find out more about our packages, or you can always email info@myHRcounsel.com to learn more about our services or to set up a demo. Any general questions that you may have, info@myHRcounsel.com, or if you are a client, use the portal. We'd be happy to assist you. So thank you all for participating today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.